So my name is Stephanie Kaplan, and I'm the Communications Director at African Services. And African Services is a 30-year-old or 30-plus-year-old service organization based in Harlem, in New York City. And we've been working with the African and Caribbean immigrant community since 1981. We offer health, housing, legal, and social services, so a pretty wide array of services. And in 1981, it was sort of originally established as a refugee resettlement agency. Our founder, Asfaw Hadera, was from Ethiopia, and when he came, he sort of saw a lack of services for people who were newly arrived in the country and didn't speak the language. And then, as time went on, and Kim Nichols was also brought on as the other co-executive director, we sort of changed our focus to a health focus, because the HIV epidemic was a pretty big issue in the 80s and 90s, and still is actually. And so we kind of diversified our services and moved away from simply a resettlement agency, since there are a lot of large organizations sort of working in that arena, and focusing more on the health and wellness of the people who come. So we have everything from HIV, STD, TB, hepatitis testing. We have ESL classes and education classes. We have a very large, robust legal department that works on low-fee. We have low-fee legal clinics, which help pretty much anyone that comes in our door with immigration issues. We have more specific legal staff that deal with housing and discrimination and other specific immigration issues. We have an outreach department. We have, and the testing department goes out and does a lot of testing in the community. We have a housing department, which assists people who are medically qualified with housing in New York City, which is always a big issue. We have a food pantry and a very a pretty great nutrition program they've expanded in the last year. So we kind of try to see ourselves as a one-stop shop, so to speak, so that people come in, they feel comfortable with the space, with the people. They're 80% plus of our staff are African born, so we speak over 24 African languages. So it's a place that, like, the words that we hear a lot when people come are, it feels like home. And so that's kind of what we want to sort of have here. And I think it helps, so when people come in, they can kind of get passed from each department. So they might come in for testing, but then they might get passed on to case management or legal or our ESL classes. And so we kind of encompass it all in one space.
Yeah, so how did the founder make this work, from the very beginning? I mean, it takes so much time and money and, network to establish something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it was established in his Bronx basement apartment. So he was running it out of his apartment in 1981. Kim Nichols came on board, and he was basically just pounding the pavement, asking people for a space, because the response was so great. He couldn't, he literally just couldn't do any more out of his apartment. So we got a space downtown, Midtown area in the 30s at a Universalist church, who offered their space. Originally, it was a small office, but then they saw the response and they gave us an entire floor. So it was there for a very long time. And then over 10 years ago, we moved up to the current space that we are now. And it really was just Kim and Asfaw going out, writing grants, asking for assistance. And, at the time, HIV was a very serious issue. So there was money coming in for support in that area. A lot of our funding is federal, state, and city municipal funds. So, it kind of just grew over time. It's pretty amazing. I mean, where it was to where it is now, we have almost 40 employees, and we also have 5 clinics in Ethiopia. So Asfaw went back to Ethiopia to kind of take our model, our outreach and testing model, and take it back to Ethiopia. And we have 5 clinics there right now. So, yeah,
and you also have a beautiful website, very modern, very cool.
Thank you. We just updated that.
It's really
we just updated
amazing.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
So, are there any programs that are designed specifically for women in African services?
Yeah, so we have a women's support group. So a lot of our services is very dependent on medical status. So if someone's HIV positive, they're enrolled in case management. So we have several groups, young like immigrant support groups, and one of them is specifically our women's support group. So they come every other week on a Wednesday, and they do activities, they talk, they do exercise classes. I know they're doing like yoga and all kinds of fun activities like that, and it's just a place for them to feel safe where, for instance, if they are HIV positive, there's no judgment. Once you walk through these doors, there's no judgment. No one, here they can be themselves, because out there with stigma and discrimination, they can't. And so it's a really great space for them, and we've been running that program for a very long time.
So how many women do you serve per month or maybe per year?
Gosh, I would have to ask. I know on total we serve about 11 or 12,000 clients a year.
Wow.
I don't know. I know our women's support group is pretty big. There's at least 30 or 40, and sometimes more depending on the Wednesday. So it's a pretty robust group.
Mm-hmm. And compared to men coming from Africa, compared to their challenges, what are the challenges of women that come from Africa?
Oh gosh, it's a pretty different dynamic for women, but it also depends on the situation in which they come. Some women come having already been educated, and they're coming here for asylum, for political persecution, but for a lot of women, education is always a big issue, because women aren't, for the most part, the proportion of women being educated in Africa to men is there's a pretty large disparity there. So we have some women come that aren't literate. They might speak their own language, but they can't even speak French, So we're dealing with that barrier, dealing with the cultural barrier, that women sometimes are more submissive. I mean, we definitely have cases in our legal department where, women are brought over as second wives or third wives, and so it's a pretty subjugated role. They're not allowed out, or they're in a compromising position in their home life, and so that's difficult. Sometimes they're scared, and they don't feel like they can take control of their lives, because at home it tends to be that way. So yeah, they do face a few different barriers than men would for sure.
And other entrepreneurs among these women, or women who want to start businesses?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the women are much more entrepreneurial than men, in an informal way. So the men will, the men are too as well. It's interesting in New York City. They have street side stands just like they would in Africa. So everybody's doing whatever they can to get by, because a lot of them don't have legal status. So for the women, they're doing a lot of work under the table. So they're working as nannies, or but what's great is to see them. They do cooking. Like one of our clients, cooks, and so she does catering. Or one of our clients is a fantastic knitter, and so she knits and sews. She's a fantastic seamstress. And you do what you can to get by. Hair braiding within the community, that's a very large, that's a pretty big part of kind of commerce. Yeah, or they'll import or buy large quantities of panya fabric or other things, and sell jewelry, and sell amongst their friends. It's always the women are so motivated, and I think that's something they bring with them too. So, even in Africa, the women tend to actually do a lot of the money making. We have a young women's immigrant support group, so we've been working with younger women ages 13 to 17. We meet once a month, and we've been doing that for over a year now, a year and a half, and it's just getting them, to meet one another, because a lot of times they might be the only African at school, and from what we've heard from them, there's always a very clear delineation between African American and African. The students make that very clear. I would say bordering on discrimination for some of the girls. So, allowing them to meet up with other young women who are sort of experiencing that same thing. And so we've been working with them. And we had a panel where other, older African immigrant women, in their 20s and 30s came and talked to them about their immigrant experience and what that was like. So, for them to not feel like they're alone or they're the only ones kind of experiencing this or living this, that they can kind of figure out how to balance their culture and their heritage, that their families are kind of, insisting on them, but also, integrating into American life, because I think that's a tough battle for them.
And why did you decide to work for African Services, Stephanie?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I originally was working in broadcast film production, and after a couple of years, I decided I was going to go into the Peace Corps. I kind of had it. And so I went to Burkina Faso for 2 years, and this was 2006 to 2008. So when I came back, the economy had just collapsed. I think that was the '08 collapse. So it was a precarious job situation at the time. So I went back into advertising, but I sort of always knew that I wanted to transition, but I didn't know exactly, in what capacity. And then one day I heard a friend on the radio who works for World Vision, and she's a spokesperson for World Vision, and I heard her on the radio, and I thought, oh my gosh, I had no idea, this idea that, because my background is in media and marketing, and that there was a role like that. I'm not sure it ever crossed my mind, really. And so then I went online, idealist.org. I don't know if you're familiar with that
website. I heard about it.
Yeah, they post jobs at nonprofits, and so I randomly looked on there and I saw African Services and one other, and I applied to both. And African Services got back to me miraculously enough, and I met with them, and they liked me, and yeah, it was fantastic. It was the best decision I made, and that was in 2010.
Wow! So that's been 3 years.
I think it was, when I walked in, like I said, how people feel at home. When I walked in and I, because I'd been in the Peace Corps for 2 years, so like I was kind of missing the culture and the atmosphere. And when I walked in and there was ladies cooking upstairs, rigra or other African food, and there's languages being thrown across the room, whether it's French or English or Spanish or Jula or More. I mean, it's, and it's exciting, and people are excited about what they do and are passionate about what they do, honestly. And Kim and Asbaha really have a lot of faith in the people that they bring into the organization. So it makes for an amazing working environment. It's a pretty amazing place, I think. It's special.
Wow. Yeah, it feels like you get a lot from it, a lot of personal satisfaction.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
So do you also partner with other organizations, and as somebody who worked on TV, right? So I'm not really sure what it is. It's media, right? So it's very creative, right? So, and I could kind of tell that from the website that you have now, is that there's a lot of creativity there. So, and that's really great because it takes, people come up with creative solutions, and that's awesome.
Kim is really open to that. I mean, basically, you go to her with an idea, and as long as it's not costing thousands of dollars, she is always up to try something. And she's been so great allowing me to try stuff. We did an anti-stigma campaign in 2011, and I had this crazy idea that I wanted to get these stencils cut out, and I wanted to go out on the street, and you can't mark on the street with chalk or anything, because it's, technically it's graffiti. So instead we got this huge truck that had a power washer on it. The streets of New York are pretty dirty. So we went out with these stencils and we literally cleaned our message into the sidewalk. And it was technically a legal way of doing graffiti, because you're cleaning the street. So that if they walk over, you're like, oh, look, I'm doing public service. And Kim was with us too. We were out from like 11 o'clock at night to almost 4 in the morning, going all over Harlem, cleaning the streets and these stencils into the sidewalk. And she was there the entire time. I mean, and it was just a nutty idea that I had, and it was a really great project, and we shot video of it, and so yeah, we are allowed for sure to kind of, and you have to be in this sort of environment and in an organization that, although 40 people seems big, it's still really small. Everybody pitches in, ideas come from anywhere, and our budgets, especially in the communications and marketing area, as I'm sure you know, are small.
Yeah.
So we have to find creative ways to get, the message out about what we do. So yeah, it's been really fun, and we partner a lot with other health organizations. We have agreements with other nonprofits in the city for various services, referrals to hospitals. We were working with a young women's immigrant group, SALTA2. Are you familiar with SALTA2 at all?
No, actually not. What is
you
that
would
again?
you would love them. SALTA2, it's SAUTI is the first word, and
Okay.
YETU, YETU, and they work specifically with young immigrant women. So originally for our young immigrant women support group, we were working with them a little bit, and we partnered with a fashion house that wanted to fund, they wanted to fund kind of these sort of classes that help build confidence. And so, yeah, we partner with a lot of organizations. Our active living initiative is something very new this year. And we have an amazing nutrition coordinator, Melissa Ip, who is heading that up. And they have started exercise classes and nutrition classes, teaching people how to cook the food that they're, traditionally cooking, but how to do it in a healthier way. How to feed their families, because you come here, it's just so different. Food can be so expensive, and it's so much easier to buy junk, basically, rather than feed family healthy food. So that's a huge initiative. They're doing outreach and posters and advertisements, which is really great. And then our DACA, Deferred Action and Low-Fee Legal Services Clinic. So Deferred Action was something that Barack Obama signed. It's not necessarily a law, so to speak, but it allows those who are here in the United States who meet a specific criteria. I forget what the age limit is, but you can't be over a certain age. You have to have entered the country before a certain date, and you can't have ever left. Mm-hmm. You have to be pursuing a diploma, a GED, or a high school diploma, or be in a current GED program. And based on all these factors, you can qualify for temporary status. So you get a social security number, you get a driver's license, so you can drive, you can get a work authorization, and it's kind of a temporary Band-Aid, so to speak, until the U.S. deals with true immigration reform. And so we've been helping in partnership with the New York Immigration Coalition and the New York Community Trust. They've helped fund to allow us to assist people to apply for this, because it's a complicated application, and there's a lot of evidence that's needed to prove all these points that you are here and that kind of thing. So we've been doing a lot of work with that. We've helped definitely over 100 people apply for DACA. And then our low-fee legal services. So, there are a lot of lawyers out there that take advantage of immigrants who have come and tell them, oh, if you give me $5,000, I can guarantee that your petition for, revision of status will be approved. And it's not the case, obviously, and they get kind of swindled. And so our low-fee legal services, our lawyers in that department help with very basic, immigration and legal services. Mm-hmm.